on part of my work is about fish genetics and population structure and fisheries policy, etc. But also, I'm also a co-founder of an initiative called Know Your Fish, where it's kind of a responsible seafood calendar, which tells us when to eat which fish and when to avoid it, and so on. So I'll be talking about that initiative. Am I audible to everyone? I hope I'm audible. Yeah. So basically, the talk or the initiative about eating seafood responsibly. And to understand, all we know that I mean, there are a lot of concerns about overfishing in our waters. But let's try to understand what overfishing is in first place, and then we'll move on to how to deal with this issue. So, as we know, as we all know, again, I have to tell you that I'm going to talk about just coastal and near-shore waters. What the Noyo Fish initiative is about the coastal or near-shore fisheries. It's not about the inland fisheries or freshwater fisheries itself. So we know that fish has this. Most of the bony fish has this unique kind of reproductive strategy called what they call broadcast spawning, which means there are uh, the fish lays several eggs, like millions of eggs, and they are all floating in the water. And as you can see in the subsequent sites, the eggs are, eggs get converted into larvae to subadult, and subadult to the adult fish. Uh, and at each point of time, uh, I mean, these each life history stages are predated upon by other fish, sometimes by other creatures, uh, and so basically, it kind of supports ecosystem in the ocean itself. So let's assume that there won't be any fishing, so and there won't be any predation per se. There will be still natural mortality and so on. And even with all the predation, say there are 100 fish we started with in year one, in year two they become 110. So I mean, the population which is added to the previous year's population is 10. Now, as long as your fishing method is catching just that extra bit, uh, it is you are maintaining the previous year's population even in the next year. And this is, in theoretical sense, what we call as a sustainable fishing practice. When we end up catching more than the fish can reproduce in within a 1 year, suppose the 100 fish become 110, but we end up catching 30 to 40 of those fish. Then what you have at the end of the year is a population which is less than what it has started with. And this is exactly what we call as the overfishing. So overfishing basically means catching more catching more fish than fish can reproduce itself. Okay, and there is it's not really a news these days that overfishing has shown its own impacts uh, on the ocean ecosystems. As you can see in this graph, in say on the x-axis, if you see from the top, there are years 1950, 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, and today. Whereas on the y-axis, it is showing the amount or total stocks or total populations of fish which were underexploited, fully exploited, overexploited, and crash. Underexploited means we are catching less than fish can reproduce. Fully exploited means we are catching, as much as fish can reproduce. Overexploited means we are catching more than fish can reproduce. And crashed is a kind of subset of overexploited where you bring the population so low that it can't really come back to its original state. And if you can see in 1950s, most of the the populations in the sea, this is a global perspective. Most of the populations were underexploited, and now today we see the most of the populations are either fully exploited or overexploited. And around 32% of all the populations in the fish populations in the world are even crashed. That means I mean, it's not possible for those populations to recover to where we know it from. So this is the kind of current situation of fishing, and there are several ways by which people are dealing with this situation. So here I'm just kind of illustrating some of the few ways. So some ways are like complete closure or marine protected area. This is the picture of Mahatma Gandhi Marine Protected Area in Andaman. But as we know that there such things have been tried not just in our waters, but say places like Newfoundland in Canada, where they had a massive embargo on all fishing activities in the Newfoundland waters because it has been overexploited. So this is one way that governments are dealing with the issue of the overexploitation of fish. The other thing, it's what we call a floating reserve or a partial closure. This is a, this is a example which I have given here is the example from the Bitra Islands in Lakshadweep. And what happened there, as you can see, the red area, the red zone here is a reef, and this reef housed uh, a unique phenomena of grouper biology called spawning aggregations, where there was a specific area in this reef, and all these groupers used to aggregate in that area to breed. Now when fisheries or fishing started on that started on this area, there was a danger that entire population might get overexploited. So the organization I worked with, NCF, they worked with the local panchayat and so on. And what has been decided that there should be a partial closure to the reef. We know that these spawning aggregations happen only in the new moon time, or what we call it Amavas time. So we if we have fishing closure only 4 days before and 4 days after the new moon time, we thought that would be enough. So it's a kind of a floating reserve where the species is not protected, the area is not completely protected, but at certain time, which is very critical for fish, there is a fishing ban. And these are the kind of scenarios also people have tried into in protecting fish populations. Then there would be technological solutions. As you can see here, there is something called as bycatch reduction device. So trawling is the most destructive kind of fisheries. Also, it's most ubiquitous kind of fisheries where a single large net is pulled to catch all the fish that can come in it. And one of the major problem which was thought of trawling was the juvenile mortality, or the small larval or subadult stages getting killed because of these activities. So, so some people have has thought of different innovations like where these small juvenile fish or larvae can escape from this trawl net, and it's called bycatch reduction device. And some of these kinds of efforts are also happening all along the coast. However, there is I mean, on the other hand, so this is what's happening from the government point of view or from the policymakers point of view. But whether consumers can also, fish consumers like us, I'm sure most of you are fish seafood eaters, and we all love our fish, and we never want fish to be disappeared from our menu. How we can uh, kind of mm, kind of protect, or what we can do from our end to minimize our impact on the fish populations. And that is what we thought of from the consumer's point of view. Can we really alter our ways that in which we eat fish? But there is a kind of a kind of a criticism to this approach, that whether can personal decisions or individual decisions can really make that difference. I mean, suppose I started eating fish in a certain way, whether it can really make the difference and so on. And I mean, even we were thinking of on the same lines. And when we saw Mumbai markets, we found a very interesting thing. So, for example, take an example of silver pomfret. This is one of the very high value fish, very famous fish, which is eaten along the coast of India. And these are the kind of, on the y-axis you see is the price in rupees of this fish. On the x-axis, there is time. So if you see silver pomfret price, it fluctuates from 200 to around 1,000 rupees per kg. But it's interesting to know when it fluctuates, at what I mean at what stage, what price it is. And if you see the graph of, uh, I mean, from January to December, which is on the x-axis, how pomfret prices are fluctuating. So as you see, there is a massive dip in the price of the fish in the month of July and August. Do you know, or even in September? Can I mean? So one guess for something like this would be, yeah, there would be monsoon ban, and that's why fish are not coming in the market. But what we know from the demand supply kind of scenario is when the supply is very less, the fish is really highly priced, because I mean, there are a lot of people who are demanding something like pomfret. But here that doesn't seems to happen. That in July, August, although there are very less pomfrets are coming, the price is also very low. And the reason why is that is a time in Maharashtra, especially in August or late August and early September, of Ganesh festival. And before that, there is a month of Shravan, where entire Hindu community, I mean, avoids eating avoids eating any non-vegetarian food. And as a result, there is not much market, or there is not much demand for the fish, and as a result, the price drops. What happens because of this is, I mean, there is not much incentive for fishermen also, even if there is no. I mean, even if the monsoon ban gets lifted on 15th of August, and so, and even if there are some good days of in the monsoon, there is not much incentive to go and catch fish, because there is not much price in the market. What actually this is showing is, this is completely, I mean, completely irrational. I mean, Ganesh festival, or for that matter, month of Shravan, but it's a consumer demand actually driving the fishing activity here. On the other hand, if you see in December, like early December and early January, when there is a Christmas time and a New Year time, there is a lot of demand. People are like in a party mood, and they want to eat fish, and as a result, the price really hikes. So what this actually shows is, the consumer demand has a decent enough impact on the fish price, and as a result, even fish catches. Even if you see on a daily basis, the pomfret demand fluctuates. And again, this is a graph from the Mumbai market. You can see there is a dip in on Monday and on Thursday, because Mondays and Thursdays, lot of Hindus don't prefer to eat non-vegetarian food, and as a result, pomfret price drops. What happens because of that is fishermen are not very keen to land fish on that time. So what these couple of graphs are just to prove a point that yes, consumer demand has some kind of agency in in regulating fishing activity, and this is what this is what our hello, yeah, any question? Hello, all right,
We can take the question last. Yeah, I think you can continue.
Y-
Sorry.
yeah, okay. You can type it down in your chat window or something, so that. you won't forget the question. So, so basically, consumer demand does have an impact on fish prices, fish landing, and fishing practices. And this is kind of a theory of change for initiatives like Know Your Fish. Now, there are the consumer-based initiatives is nothing new, and there are lots of such initiatives in the Western world, like Seafood Watch, Ocean Wise, Fish to Fork, Sustainable Seafood Initiative, and so on. However, they have a slightly different model, and we can't use the same kind of model here in India. First of all, most of the Western world, there's a lot of emphasis on importing fish from other places to their own country. So this is a graph of imports of United States, and just look at the on the right hand side the number of countries from which the fish actually comes to US. Other thing, so for 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 Western countries, it's easier to label from where the fish is coming from and how they are caught, whether they are caught by sustainable practices or not sustainable practices, etc. Other thing is packaging. Most of the developed countries now sell all kind of food in completely packaged form. The advantage of packaging is it provides a place for a label. You can put a label on it. So most of the most of the consumer initiatives in developing countries have this label approach where they can uh, basically look at where the fish is coming from and categorize into best choice, good choice, or avoid based on where it's coming from and what kind of fisheries activities are there. Now, a place like India, when we are designing some kind of a consumer initiative for in a place like India, we can't have this approach because most of the fish which is consumed in India, it's caught in India. So the fish is not. I mean, we are not eating fish which is imported from somewhere else. We started doing that with Norwegian salmon or etc. But still, it's restricted to super elite or hyper rich people in the cities. But most of the fish caught in India, fish consumed in India, it's caught in India. Also, we prefer to buy our fish very fresh. I mean, for a regular fish eater, they want to go to the market, they want to see the fish, open the gills, and check the freshness of the fish, and so on. So, the packaged products till now, they're not much preferred. I mean, the open market system also still is preferred. So for something like this calendar approach is very useful, where where you don't label fish that this is coming from a sustainable catch, this is coming from not sustainable catch, and so on. But you look at their biology itself and see what are the I mean, in a year, what are the times where the fish can be consumed, and what are the times which is critical for fish, mainly in terms of breeding biology, at the time when they breed and so on, and where we should avoid. And Know Your Fish came up with, I mean, Know Your Fish found this is a most, the rational approach for something like this. And so we had the calendar approach. So Know Your Fish basically is a calendar which provides information about when to eat what fish and when to avoid it in order to minimize your impact on ocean. So this is what Know Your Fish is. Now, what we have to keep in mind when we put this calendar together, one is of course fishing at the time of spawning or a breeding time, which is crucial. So as you can see in these three things, this is a schematic that for this particular fish, February and March and June and July and August is the important time where this fish breeds. So if we want to give some kind of a rest, in terms of demand, the most relevant times to give rest would be February, March, and July and August. Because if we catch fish at that time, there are very few fish uh, which are surviving in the next generation. Second thing is the biology of the different fish itself. Uh, as you can see, how how the trophic level itself, how different fish has different lifespans and different sexual maturities. So as a result, the resilience of the fish also changes. So, for example, sardine, which is a broadcast spawner, produces millions of eggs and has a sexual maturity just in a couple of years, can be more resilient or can take the fishing pressure compared to something like sharks and groupers, especially sharks, which have internal fertilization and sexual maturity comes say at age like 25 or something. So uh, species which are slow growing, late maturing, which are not broadcast spawners, etc., like sharks and all, will, I mean, are more threatened in terms of overfishing and so on. So these are the things that we had to keep in mind while putting together a calendar. And the catch trends, of course, whether currently a particular fish is getting caught or not caught, and so on. So based on their biology itself, what we try to do is we try to give a vulnerability score from -4 to +4. So as much the score is positive, it's less vulnerable, whereas the score goes into negative, it becomes more and more vulnerable. So with the one example of Baramundi, and other thing is, of course, non-target catch. Or so we know that none of our fishing methods are target specific. We don't go in the water and catch only thing that we want to catch. It doesn't happen. We end up catching lot of other stuff along with what we want to catch also. So along with so we have to and when you are making a calendar for something like this, for fish, you have to also keep in mind what else is getting caught during that point of time. I'll illustrate this with an example of a baramundi. So what we have to keep in mind is seasonality in breeding season of fish, vulnerability of the target species, and accidental and non-target catch. That's what I have shown. So let's take an example of baramundi, which is a common fish which is caught all along the coastline, especially in the rocky regions. Now, what we know from the uh, baramundi's biology, it breeds in September, October, and November. So technically, it breeds little in September, but mainly in October and November. So as a result, September, October, and November are the times where we should avoid that fish. But when you look at the vulnerability of this vulnerability score in terms of how quickly it can reproduce and how resilient it is to fishing pressures, we saw that the vulnerability scores falls under positive. So it's a kind of a resilient species. So what this vulnerability score allows us is to be lenient or stricter with our criteria. So because it's less vulnerable, we could have been lenient and we said, okay, so in September it's not breeding much, so we can keep September away from the avoid category in our calendar. So this is how this is how the seasonality of breeding season and vulnerability of the fish we put together to have a kind of a calendar. But third thing which is also important is accidental or non-target catch that we had to keep in mind. And what we know that barramundi is caught either by hook and line or large gill nets. And along with barramundi, things like sharks and sea fish, what you call aikura, is also getting caught. Now these fish mainly breed in March, April, and May. So as a result, when you are choosing to eat barramundi in March, April, and May, you are, indirectly threatening not the barramundi itself, but the other fish which is caught uh, by it. So while making calendar, we have to keep these things in mind. So this is ultimately our recommendation for when to eat barramundi. So what we can recommend now that you have to avoid barramundi in months of October and November so that it can breed, and in months of March, April, and May, so that the fish that gets caught along with barramundi can breed. Now today, if you go on our website www.knowyourfish.org.in, you can see recommendations of more than 40 categories of different fish which are commonly caught in on all along the west coast of India. So this is what essentially what we do. Now if we, I mean, if this is also it's a bit too much, and you want, like, I mean, if somebody asks me, can you, I mean, can you think of like five different states, five quick kind of five easy ways to remember what to eat and what not to eat. These are the five ways to eating seafood responsibly. That's what we think based on our experience and our studies. First is avoid sharks and groupers. Sharks and groupers are top of the food chain. They, I mean, they are slow breeding, late maturing, and at the moment their populations are doing really badly. So I mean, so they can't really handle any more fishing pressure, and as a result they can't really handle any more demand from our end. So avoid sharks and groupers. Avoid fish with caviar, because caviar is basically eggs of fish. I mean, the if these eggs are in the water, uh, I mean, they have a better chance of survival um, and reproduction. I mean, becoming a big fish that we can ultimately eat. So avoid buying fish with caviar. Minimize shrimps and prawns. Now, shrimp and prawns are not particularly threatened, but the way shrimps and prawns are getting caught is by trawling, which is a very destructive method, where a single large net is pulled from the bottom of the seafloor, and everything else gets caught, and very and habitat destruction also happens on a larger scale. Now there are shrimps and prawns which are cultivated in the shrimp farms, but when the shrimp is on your plate, or when you go to a hotel and see a shrimp, you can't really know where it's coming from. So it's better to minimize eating shrimps and prawns. As much as possible, we have to eat locally. I mean, just to avoid the footprint that we have. Generally, what happens is the locally small scale fishermen, what they catch, it's tend to be the fish which is at the moment available in the water, and the kind of methods are used are because they are in small scale. Their impact is less compared to the commercial
ഞാനും
fishing.
വരുവാ ഞാൻ വരുവാ
So as a result, eat locally and use responsible seafood options. So know your fish calendar you can use. There is another initiative called in season fish. That calendar also you can use. It doesn't matter which calendar you use, as long as you use some calendar, uh, it's fine. And this is the way. And so these are the one of the few peoples which are behind know your fish initiative. As you can see, they all are students, so it's a completely students kind of initiative. And I mean, I'll end here, and I can just say that enjoy seafood responsibly. So thank you very much. I mean, if people have any questions, I would love to take it.
Yeah, thank you, Irish. So
Sure.
probably those who have questions, you can come to the chat box. Otherwise, it will be a big chaos. So probably you can ask the
Oh,
question in the chat box. So we
fair
can
enough.
answer from there. When you
So
can talk, you can talk, but we will ask in the chat box.
so can somebody ask me question, or should I just see the chat box and um not sure whether I'll should I stop sharing screen or what?
You can keep your screen. It's okay.
Yeah. So chat box. I can't see chat box here. Can somebody like ask? That would be lovely. There are. I saw the chat box. Okay. Is there a so somebody has asked? Is there a way to selectively catch fish? Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. So now, I mean, there are there are very few methods which are highly selective. Uh, One of them, which we know from Lakshadweep Islands, it's called pole and line fisheries. It's a method which catches tuna and only tuna. But the thing with, because it's not really a hook, and tuna, tuna bites the I mean the thing which is shining at the end of the hook, and it's pulled on the board. And however, this is the only method which we know is very selective. But apart from that, if you are going in open waters, there is, it's because our species is multi-species. Another thing that we can't be very selective is we are in the tropical waters, unlike people from the developed countries, where most of developed countries are in temperate area. And in temperate area, there are strong season. The seasonality is very strong. So as a result, uh, there are peaks of different fish. Here we don't have that. Our fisheries itself is a multi-species fisheries, so we can't really selectively catch fish. Apart from pole and line fishing, which is only restricted for tuna, there are no kind of selective methods, and it's not really possible also that you are going for grouper and just end up catching grouper. It's very difficult. Other thing is, the other question is, does this apply for our freshwater fishes? The short answer is no. We know that the freshwater fishes are in much more vulnerable situation. But at the moment, Know Your Fish initiative is only for coastal and marine fishes. I really don't have any recommendation for, whether how to eat freshwater fish responsibly. But yeah, it's out of my purview. Just to reconfirm, are shrimps a ground feeder? They're not ground feeder. Yeah, they are mostly on the ground, but they feed on plankton and so on. Next question: catching with harpoons. I don't know. Badush is asking about catching with harpoons. What about catching it with harpoons? Um, I'm not sure. So, next question is, you. Somebody has asked. You told about 10% of that extra fish catch can be caught and consumed. But what about the species which are not consumed? Is um, is its number growing higher? So the thing is that 10%. I have. I'll go back to that slide. Yeah. So these are the this is what I have shown you here, and this is basically a schematic, or a cartoon representation uh, to demonstrate what overfishing is. So overfishing. So here I said that if there is 10% increase at the end of the year, as long as you are taking only the increased population, or population, suppose 100 fish become 110 and you are catching only 10, that means uh, the basic population, or it hasn't changed from year to year, and as a result the population stays constant, and it's a sustainable way of fishing. The question is, what about other fish it's caught? Yeah, it's applicable to any fish and any fishing method. Um, the next question from Arun is, here in Trivandrum, sometimes I see big sardines. Vendor says it's a Oman sardine. Um, I don't know whether it's a see. I don't know what sardine it is. It would be really lovely to see the photo. Um, Sometimes some species of sardine can be named like that Oman sardine or something. But I know that a fisherman from Kerala has a history of fishing in the really deep waters and going really far, and it's very much possible that the sardines are actually caught in the Oman waters, and that's why they are calling Oman sardine. But I really don't know I mean what this means. The next question is, what all are the major threats to smaller fish populations? Um, I don't know. The question can if Atulya PC can elaborate on that question. Can you elaborate on the question? Hello, about threats to smaller fish population. Are you still around?
Probably she'll come to the chat box itself. Yeah.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Let's on to the next question.
Yeah, so the next question is, how do you educate larger public on enjoying seafood responsibly, or it is more practical to create awareness amongst the fishermen? So one thing is, these are two. This is a question from Nisha. So these are, uh, it's the tackling of overfishing has to be done on a multiple fronts. This is one front by which, I mean, there are several fronts by which through which the tackling of overfishing can be done. Working with fishermen is more towards the kind of gear that they can use, the kind of fishing policies, and so on. Whereas in terms of people who love to eat fish or fish consumers, I think something like fishing calendar can be a best educating tools. One of the major misconceptions that I have come across so far is people think that all fish breed in monsoon. When we actually go through the data, it's not true. And the calendar actually educates people that not all fish breeds in monsoon. Some fish breed in winter months, summer months, and so on. And it's equally harmful to catch those fish. So actually, I mean, what Noyofish has found that the calendar is a excellent way to sensitize, to start this dialogue with the people who love to eat fish. Um, okay. So next question is, how can we control the catfish population because it eats other fish? So I think you are talking about the genus called Pangasius, which is grown as a aquaculture product, and yes, that's a big problem that they are. I mean, that they are out in our fresh waters, and they are having. I mean, they are having a big impact on the local fish biodiversity. Uh, there is really it's a really tough call in terms of controlling this population, because the best way to control uh, would be not allowing fish to enter in our natural water sources like rivers and ponds and streams, etc., and restrict them to the aquaculture ponds itself. But what we know, that such thing is not possible. In monsoon there is a lot of rain and everything gets mixed up, and these and these pangasius eggs or even small fish can reach in our. So at the moment this is a this is a problem. It's gone a bit beyond tackleable. uh, Only we can what we can do is it's not to demand this this fish, so that there is no incentive for to bring more pangasius and do more kind of aquaculture practices with those fish. And it's called basa in in a popular language, and that is maybe the one way to uh, curb this crisis, but actually it's quite gone out of hand. uh, the Rohan Mantis has asked, since most of the fishing in India is trawling, the varieties of fish you suggest we avoid during breeding season is invariably caught due to trawling. So avoiding eating them isn't a solution. So trawling itself is not. So trawling itself has two, three different kinds. There is a mid-water trawling, there is a bottom trawling, and different communities of fish gets caught in mid-water trawling compared to and bottom trawling. So for example, if I just have to give examples, fish like soulfish, crockers, some groupers like Epiphyllus diacanthus and so on are caught in the bottom trawling. They are they are caught less in the midwater trawling, whereas fishes species like threadfin bream, ribbonfish, etc., are caught in, or even squids and cuttlefish are caught in the midwater trawling, and they are not caught in bottom trawling. So, so when Know Your Fish calendar was designed, we have kept in mind this kind of situation, and uh, so so there is, I mean, when you actually see fish guild wise, that uh, are or is there a is are there months where most of the bottom trawled fish don't breed, or most of the midwater trawled fish don't breed, and we were fortunate enough to find actually those months. I mean, I can't pinpoint you at the moment, but you can I mean, you can free to see our data, and you can see there are groups of months and groups of fish always are in the avoid list or in a preferred choice list in those particular months, and that is because of the kind of gear that they got. Yeah, so that is how we try to address the problem as much as possible. Of course, there are overlaps in gear types, and but I mean, this is what all we can do. um, then Atulya asked smaller population in terms of, oh yes, both size of the population and size of the fish too. So size of the population is very interesting because at the moment we uh, I mean, the the way we the way we define fish stocks is based on the landing side. So if you go to fisheries literature, you see um, fish fish stocks of Mumbai, fish stocks of Kochi, fish stocks of Kottayam, etc. However, that is not how they are distributed in the water, where they might have different populations which with varying geographical range. And at the moment, we don't have the idea of what kind of geographical range are there for different kind of fish. So we don't really know that which are the smaller populations or which are the bigger populations, both in terms of number of population and the geographical spread. And that is one of the things that I'm trying to address with my PhD. So hopefully I could able to give answer of your question in 3 years time or something like that. So other the question from Bibin Xavier is, what is your comment about the global collapse of all major fisheries by 2050? Can we hopefully rely on the policy interventions and other management measures to seize the ongoing global collapse? Um, I don't know. I mean, nobody has seen 2050. Some of the fish. So collapse of when you say global collapse of major fisheries, some of the fish which are highly abundant at highly priced, highly valued, they might have a very difficult times in coming years. But what we have seen in fisheries, and it's a big problem, is what we call um shifting targets. That means, so for example, I'll give an example of ribbonfish. 20 years before, ribbonfish did not have any market value, and nobody was catching ribbonfish in India. But suddenly they thought that, oh, in China there is a lot of market for ribbonfish, and suddenly ribbonfish are getting caught. So what tend to happen is, once some fish becomes rare, some other thing takes its place, and as a result, what we say is major fisheries might collapse. That means in 2050, maybe the kind of fish which is commonly eaten would be different than what we do it now. But it would be still the fish that we know. It won't be something like completely different. Uh, Arun is asking, what about invasive fish species like northern snakeheads, etc. Um, Invasives is a big problem in freshwater systems and not the marine systems. At least in India, in Mediterranean is a big problem, lionfish and so on. But at least not in Indian waters, invasive is not a big problem. In freshwater system, it's a very big problem. but I'm not an expert on freshwater systems, so I mean I'm not in a position to answer this question. Um, David Raju's question: uh, do you have any data on studies on global warming effect on fish breeding populations and habitats? Absolutely no idea whether I mean whether there are any effects like that. I mean, I really don't know anything about it, but I know a couple of people who have joined. Might be able
Hello.
to. Yeah. Hello. Yeah, I think all the chat questions are over. Is there any more questions for this? Hello.
I don't think. Do you have anything you want to add, Mahirish?
Nothing. Just I mean, as whenever you feel like eating fish, refer our calendar and in eat fish responsibly. That's what I can say. Badush has shared a link of uh, to everyone www.knowyourfish.org.in, and you can get monthly calendars on this for free. You can also, I mean, use our social media platform like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to find these recommendations.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just I over to Al Badush. I mean, we just want to say what are
sure,
thanks
sure.
from outside. Badush, over to you.
Myresh, I think it'll be really awkward if I say thank you to you, but
Yeah, be
RFA and
awkward.
Atlas,
Don't be awkward. Be awkward.
on behalf of RFA
Okay.
and Atlas Society and KNS, I'm thanking you for giving this wonderful presentation and all the best for know your fish.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you
And
very much.
it was really good and informative. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, please, send me text from Badush or anyone else. No problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Myresh. Good
Yeah.
night.
Yeah,
Good
thank
night.
you all, and also just to add that we'll be next 1 week we are back with a lot of other talks. They'll be on orchids and a lot of things. I'll be keep on posting you all those things. Anyway, stay safe and stay healthy.
Cool. See you. See you, everyone.
Bye.